Huh. I do think the Bengals are better, but I actually do think the Ravens aren't super far off. So we can get into the Ravens now. They disappointed last year. Lamar was dealing with some injuries at times. Half the team was hurt. But I look on paper, this roster, I don't know. I kind of like it more now that I've been looking at it. What are your thoughts on the Ravens generally?
I think I was a little low on them a little earlier in some of the earlier episodes. You hear me talking about the Dolphins episode specifically. I was like, I'm not particularly scared of this Baltimore team. I
Yeah.
think I was a little low on them. I do not think they're amazing still. I think that they're relying entirely too much on Rashad Bateman to pop off insanely hard.
Yeah.
And that's the last thing you want to do. J.K. Dobbins, of no fault of his own, is coming back from an injury, so that's always a risk you're taking right there. And Gus Edwards as well. Because the problem is like
Their
three
top
of
two
their,
running backs are coming off major injuries.
three of their top four backs are coming off of torn ACLs.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
Justice Hill too. You're right. You're
yeah,
right.
it doesn't bode well for them. Like their only guy who's coming off from like a healthy season is Mike Davis. And Mike Davis, he's okay. He's better than Justice Hill. But the problem is like you don't want him being your starter when you can have J.K. Dobbins or even Gus Edwards.
I think
So
everyone hates Mike Davis right now because everyone expected him to be this fancy sleeper last year, and he just wasn't because Cordarrelle Patterson kind of took that spot from him. I
I
don't
mean,
care about that. Like, yes, I wanted Mike Davis to succeed in fantasy football last year, but at the same time, for the real NFL, he's a fine depth piece in your
yeah,
backfield.
for sure. Also, I mean, it's no fault of his own that Cordell Patterson finally found like his calling as an
Right,
NFL player,
right.
which great
Absolutely.
for him because I'm a big Cordell Patterson fan, and also I had him on my fantasy team. The guy was popping off.
Yeah, he was. He really was. So
Um,
you raise a good point about the receivers, though, because I do like Rashad Bateman,
yeah,
but I don't think he's ready to be a number one receiver. Now you can argue
no,
Mark Andrews. You can argue Mark Andrews is here, so he's pretty much the number one receiver.
yeah,
But at the same time, I just the receivers have been a weak point for the Ravens for a while.
yeah,
Like look at the rest of the guys they have. A lot of unproven players. I mean, James Prochet, who's getting some buzz right now, but
yeah. I
buzz
mean,
to what? Buzz to be awesome or buzz to be a 45 catch guy? Like I don't know.
yeah, like no, these top three receivers of Rashad Bateman, Devin Duvernay, and James Proche, like
Is it
I
Prosh?
don't
I don't know.
Proche, I have no clue.
Okay. I thought it
I
was Prochet. I don't even know, to be honest. He has a
No clue.
I'm sorry.
Um, Either way, but I like these guys. They're young players that like could develop and be better. But the problem is that they're relying on three, not just like, oh, we're relying on this one young guy to it's all three of them. And then on top of that, the rest of this receiving core is no offense to the receiving core, but these are like nobodies. These are people that the Ravens are expecting a lot out of guys that like need
Yeah.
time to develop. And I don't think that's fair to any of these wide receivers to be thrown. Like Rashad Bateman, maybe because he was a first round draft pick.
We'll say about Rashad Bateman, he was dealing with an injury in the first half of last season, and he
That's
came
true.
on and had a good end of the year. But like I said, I think he's ideally right now he's my number two receiver. Like I would like him if he had, like obviously as an example, he's not in the NFL anymore. But like if they had what Anquan Bolden was for this team a while ago, if that was on this team, and then you had Rashad Bateman as your two, something like that would be a dynamic I could get on board with. But him as the
Yeah.
number one troubles me a lot, even with Mark Andrews there.
Yeah, and the problem is there's no like solid backups that you feel you can rely on. Like these are young players who also need time to
I
develop.
have a
And it's
confession
just
I have to make though.
yeah,
Tylon Wallace, I traded for him in my dynasty football league I'm in because I was like, the Ravens have no receivers. Might as well take a stab at one of these young guys. It sounds like Prochet is going to be the guy though. That's the number two receiver, not Tylon Wallace. So I kind of
yeah.
missed on that one, but just wanted to mention that as well to just to put that out there.
Yeah, no, I get what you're saying though. Like
Yeah, it's
it's
a
just
dart
such
throw.
a it's such a toss up with like what the Ravens are doing. I think their offensive line also like Ronnie Stanley's good, but like as it stands right now, he's like out with an injury, so like
He
that's not
played,
good.
so he was maybe the best left tackle in the league in 2019, and he has played, I believe, 7 games since.
Yeah, that's the
They
problem.
traded Orlando Brown. So I actually do like some of these moves they've made, though. Like Tyler Linderbaum, I think was an awesome pick. We could talk about their draft because everyone, I'm one of the many who love their draft. I think you'd agree as well, right?
Yeah, I think the Ravens draft was pretty good. I think Kyle Hamilton was a good pick. I don't think
Yeah,
it's an amazing pick because I don't think they necessarily needed to take him, but I understand that like when he
we can get
falls,
to that. I know what you're going with that one. Yeah, I
Are
mean,
you
I
talking about
like.
the thing that came out yesterday?
Oh no. I did see that too. He got burned at practice. I was more referring to the fact that they also have Brandon Stevens and Chuck Clark are just backups on this team. They're starting caliber safeties. I thought that's what you meant by that. That they
No, no,
didn't.
no. Well, I do agree with that notion as well. I think it's kind of like you have Marcus Williams and Chuck Clark, especially. I think those are two players that are pretty good. I think Kyle Hamilton, you didn't need to draft him, but I also understand that like he was there number 14. It's Kyle Hamilton.
True. Right.
Gotta take
Take the
him.
value. That's yeah. I mean, I think
Yeah.
they should trade Chuck Clark because he could hold a lot of value to a lot of other teams instead of just being the third safety on this team. So it'll be interesting to see if that happens at all. But getting back to the O line, I actually didn't realize Morgan Moses was as good as he is, but he had a really good year with the Jets last year, and I think he's going to help opposite Ronnie Stanley. Kevin
Yeah.
Zeitler is a good veteran. He's been getting it done for a long time for a lot of different teams. I think he's helping. And then really the opposite guard of Kevin Zeitler is the only position I'm kind of worried about. Guys like Ben Cleveland and Tyree Phillips, I just don't know a lot about these guys. So it'll be interesting to see if they can fill the
Yeah.
void. But what do you think about their O line? Do you think it will
Um,
hold up?
I
I
think
mean,
it has
Ronnie
a
Stanley's a
potential.
question mark.
I think it has a potential to be a good O line, but that's really counting on Tyler Linderbaum to really, because like being thrown into the fray as like a first round draft pick, it's tough. But Tyler Linderbaum's good, so I don't think that's a worry. But like Tyree Phillips and like Ben Cleveland, Ben Powers, you're counting on these young guys that like haven't really played a lot to step up. But I think they have the potential to be a good line.
Yeah.
So, and that's also why I feel like I was too low on the Ravens because the more I look at the roster, the more I'm like, yeah, this isn't as bad as a team as I
Right.
want them to be because I want the Dolphins to beat them. But
Yeah.
this team isn't. It's not a terrible team at all, and I
No, I
can't
agree.
get a lot.
I also, speaking of Dolphins, Jawan James is just on this team as well, and he's had a ton of injuries. But if he can get
Yeah,
healthy, he can help them as well.
yeah, no, for sure.
It'll be interesting to see if that happens, though. One more thing I want to highlight with the offense before we move to the defense. Have you looked at their tight end depth chart? They have a ridiculous amount of tight ends who like probably will make the team.
Yeah,
Have you
because
seen that at all?
so they got Mark Andrews and Nick Boyle as the 1 and 2, and then they have
Yeah,
the two guys they drafted, Charlie Kolar and Isaiah Likely.
likely, yeah. But then they even have Josh Oliver from the Jags, if you remember him. He was a third round
They
pick.
do,
And
yeah.
like, I don't know, there's some buzz that he might be the third tight end over those rookies right now. I just think they have a lot of tight end options, and a lot of them, besides Nick Boyle, are pass catching first tight ends. Maybe their plan is to like use a lot of tight ends instead of the receivers
Yeah,
and hope these receiving tight ends can translate. I don't
yeah.
know if that's a good plan or not. I mean, Mark Andrews is great. I don't know if you need to have two tight ends like that, but it looks like that's their plan.
That is actually a really good point, and that's very important to consider. Maybe they're onto something. Maybe they know what's up. So we'll
They're going to
see.
The game. The two tight ends as your top two pass catchers. I
Maybe. I
mean,
mean, why not?
yeah, we'll see. Well, I remember when the Niners had the third pick, and some people were like, "What if they take Kyle Pitts and just pair him with George Kittle?" I was behind that, but obviously they went in a different direction. But I don't know.
Yeah,
It'll be interesting to see. I guess the last thing we got to talk about Lamar himself as well.
yeah,
So, what are your thoughts with Lamar? Because I feel like I'm really critical of him, but it's not for the reason some idiots say like, "Oh, he's just a running back." It's more like I don't know. I don't think he's gotten it done. I don't think he's proven it in a playoff setting, in a consistency setting.
yeah.
And as a passer, like he is a great runner. It pays off to be a great running quarterback.
Yeah.
But as a passer, I think he needs to get better, especially if his weapons aren't going to be that great.
No, for sure. I totally agree. I think Lamar Jackson, I think he's a good quarterback. I think people like to undersell that he's a good quarterback, but I also do agree with the notion that he still hasn't entirely gotten it done. And obviously there's the whole thing with now it's like the contract situation. And on top of that, he's had some injuries, and it's just, I don't know. There's just like a lot of things going off Lamar Jackson that I think that it's kind of affecting how good he really can be. So I don't know. I kind of
Yeah.
agree that I think Lamar Jackson's good, but I think he really does need to prove that he can get it done in the big moments. Because currently, as it stands, he hasn't. And you could argue also he hasn't had the chance to, but you know,
Yeah, because they were the one seed in it was 2019, I think, right? Was that 2019? And then they lost to the Titans when Derrick Henry was going crazy. And then they lost again in 2020, and they didn't make the playoffs last year because of the countless injuries they had to deal with last season. But I don't know. I don't dislike Lamar Jackson. I think he's a fine quarterback, but
Yeah, for sure.
like I don't see him being this Pat Mahomes level talent. And he also
Yeah.
doesn't have the weapons, but I don't know.
No, that's totally fair. I don't think that's an invalid take, but I do like Lamar and hopefully he like kind of figures it all out. But it's up in the air right now. And I think he's a good quarterback. Like you can win with Lamar Jackson. The problem is there's just a lot of like other circumstances going on that get in the way of all that. So
Yeah, like from the second he came into the league, because we saw him drop in the draft, and then we saw the idiots saying, "Oh, he should have taken snaps at receiver, not quarterback," in the workouts and stuff like that. He's just a very polarizing figure, and I'm not even totally sure why. Like, I don't know why we can't just accept him for who he is as a player, but I don't
yeah.
know. He always has these narratives going around him, and it's very odd, in my opinion.
No, yeah, I totally agree. It's a weird scenario.
But moving on to the defense, which I actually think might be the strength of this team if things go as the Ravens hope. They have a new defensive coordinator. So this guy, Mike McDonald, he was Michigan's defensive coordinator a year ago. But before that, he had been with the Ravens for a long time. So he's replacing Don Wink Martindale, who's moved on to the Giants. He's the new defensive coordinator. And it'll be interesting to see. I don't think a lot of things will change schematically just because, as I mentioned, he was already with the team before. But when you look at this defense, a lot of carryovers. We mentioned Kyle Hamilton and Marcus Williams. That's really the only new faces on this defense as the new safety tandem. But
Yeah.
what do you think about this defense overall?
I think the defense is very solid from like the linebackers up to the secondary. I think their only real issue I feel currently is their defensive line. Their best player as it stands is Calais Campbell, and he's up there in age.
He's declining. I agree.
Yeah, and then like you have Michael Pierce, who like when he's on the Ravens initially, like people are like, oh, he's got a bad work ethic. He's letting his weight get in the way, and hopefully he's fixed that by now. But Michael Pierce, he's good, but he's nothing spectacular. And we have Justin Madibuk.
I think he's
I think what's
Matabuki.
Matabuki, something like that. So like he's good, but he's not amazing either. They're relying too much on the Calais Campbell to lead them, but Calais Campbell's getting up there in age. And I don't think that's fair to like expect him to
Right.
fix these problems. So I think the real issue is the D line, but I think the rest of this team is very good. I think the linebackers are pretty good. And I think the secondary is pretty good too. So I think I kind of agree with the fact that like, yeah, their defense is probably the strength because this is a very well-rounded team.
And you mentioned Michael Pierce. He's dealt with some injuries. He's in Minnesota for 2 seasons. He only played 8 games in that span. But I agree the D line against the run, it could hurt them. And I actually don't think they have a lot of good run stopping linebackers either. Like Patrick Queen, in all honesty, he's kind of been a bust. We'll see if he can improve in year 3, but I don't think he's been very good. He hasn't been good against the pass, especially, but I don't really think he's been an impact player just generally. So it'll be interesting to see if he can, solidify that inside linebacker position this year. But their edge rushers, I don't think they're half bad. Our guy from Penn State, Odafe Owe, he's coming into his second year. I'm hoping that he kind of takes the reins as a full-time outside linebacker this year. Kind of split time with Justin Houston last season, but Justin Houston, just like Calais Campbell, starting to kind of age a little bit here.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think Patrick Queen's been good. I don't know if I'd say he's a bust. He just hasn't lived up to that potential.
First round pick status. He maybe not a bust, but I don't know if he's been worth a first rounder just yet. But he is young. I'm not writing him off completely.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think the good thing is that they brought back Josh Bynes, and I think that's really gonna help like with his trying to develop Patrick Queen because like Josh Bynes, like he's older for sure, but I think he provides a value to help these like young guys. Yeah, like you're saying, our guy from Penn State, Owe as well, like that's a huge help for him as well. So we'll see how that.
And Tyus Bowser ain't half bad either. I mean, he had 7 sacks last year. He finally got to be a full-time starter, and he showed out. And then I thought it was interesting. One of their draft picks was David Ojabo, who, he's going to be out for the year with the torn Achilles, but he was a first round talent, and they're going to have him long term now as well.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think this linebacker core could be pretty good. And I think we just gotta wait and see. But I do agree that Tyus Bowers decent, and like obviously Ojabo was like that's like a steal if he can come
Right.
back next year and really improve.
Definitely, definitely. And then we mentioned the secondary, but just to hit the point home, Marlon Humphrey, he's proven himself at this point. We know he's at the very least he's one of the better corners in the league. Where you rank him, that's besides the point. But he's definitely gets it done as a number one corner. Marcus Peters is coming back from I believe it was the ACL or was it an Achilles? I don't remember exactly, but coming off a major knee injury. What do you expect from him? Because we've seen him be one of the biggest boomer bust corners out there, but he is a playmaker. He gets it done interceptions wise.
For sure. I think that although he is coming off an injury, like him when he was traded to the Ravens, he was him. He was that guy.
Yeah, he was.
Marcus Peters was pretty excellent for them. Like that was one of the better like corner duos in the league at the time. If Marcus Peters, I think the only real issue is like, can he come back from the injury like health wise? Scheme fit and how good of a player he is. I don't think that's the issue. I think it's like, can he come back from the injury same as how he used to be? So
right.
I think that's the issue. I'm not necessarily worried about like him as a player. I think he's going to be okay. Can he come back from that injury like full speed?
Yeah, I agree. Because Marcus Peters, his speed was part of what made him good. Like he gets those interceptions. He's sprinting down the field trying to get a pick six. I mean, did he have 3 touchdowns that year, his first year with the Ravens? I think he might have.
He had a lot of pick sixes. I don't remember specifically, but he had a lot.
He's been a very good player for a long time. And the other guy I wanted to highlight, very low profile signing, but the Ravens picked up Kyle Fuller from the Broncos. And of course, he was quite good with the Bears a couple of years back. Yeah. Had a disappointing year with Denver, but if they can get him to be even half the guy he used to be, he could be a really valuable addition as the third corner as well.
No, that is a very good point. I think Kyle Fuller, yeah, he has down year, but I think you're right. He has a chance to bounce back, so we'll see.
Yeah, and if he's playing with great corners, great safeties like this, I mean, he's going to have less pressure on him, so he could just fill in even a smaller role and be effective in that role. So, and we mentioned the safeties already. No need to really relitigate that. But I think Chuck Clark, I'm just saying, keep an eye out. Maybe a team, if they need a safety bad, might give up some picks to get him. But
for sure, yeah,
it'd be interesting. And then even this team, their special teams, Mike, kind of really effective. Looking at Justin Tucker at kicker, he set the NFL record for field goal made last year, and they're bringing in Jordan Stout as their punter, another draft pick. Was he 4th round pick, I believe? Was that where they took
4th rounder, yeah.
Yeah. I think Stout, 4th round. Were you okay with that pick for them?
Yeah, I think 4th round is a little high.
Yeah.
For a punter, but I think Jordan Stout's a good player. And I want to root for the guy. He's from Penn State. So
definitely, totally. And then even Devin Duvernay made the All-Pro team as a kick returner last year. So I think their special teams are pretty locked up.
Yeah, no, they gotta get special teams.
Yeah.
They're not worried about that.
Totally. I think what we've really figured out here is that the question mark for this team, what's gonna determine how good they are, is how good this offense can be. Can guys like Dobbins and Lamar himself, can they step up, overcome this weak receiver room, and really take this team to new heights? Looking at their schedule, similar to the Bengals, they're playing a lot of the same teams because they're in the same division. Jets week 1, they're in New York, home for the Dolphins, in New England, home for the Bills and Bengals, in New York for the Giants, home for the Browns, in Tampa, in New Orleans, home for the Panthers, in Jacksonville, home for Denver, in Pittsburgh, in Cleveland, home for Falcons and Steelers, and then in Cincy to finish the year. Just like the Bengals, they have a week 10 bye, which is interesting. It's a similar schedule to the Bengals, right? So I would say, just like the same discussion we already had about the division, right? Like this is going to be a blood fight, blood feud, like always with these teams. And then, how do you think the Ravens, put it this way, do you think the Ravens can be a playoff team? Do you think they have that capability?
I think they can be. I think it really just also depends on how the rest of the AFC shakes up and who's going to be in the playoffs. But yeah. I think I agree. I do agree with what you're saying that the big thing right now is the offense, how good this offense could be. But I think also in terms of healthiness is also a big thing for this Ravens team. It could easily fall right back into what happened last year.
Right. Totally. I
So
I'm leaning. I actually think if this team's healthy, they could probably win like 11 games and be a wild
yeah,
card team. I really do like this team.
that's fair.
That's probably where I would predict them right now. But like you said, the injuries, they just gotta stay healthy because that's what held them back a season ago. And you mentioned your Dolphins earlier, like you want they're like people might have been confused why you said that, but this AFC is going to be crazy in terms of the wild card, and the Dolphins and the Ravens are definitely going to be competing with each other to make that wild card spot.
For sure. No, I totally agree. I think it's gonna be a good year for the AFC. I think there's a lot of good teams in the
Yeah,
AFC. And I think we're gonna see a lot of teams with like bad records for like what they should have, but I think
right.
it's just because of how good the AFC really is.
Wait till we get to the AFC West. And one of those teams is going to have to lose some games. Like they're all great, but unfortunately, one of the teams isn't going to be able to be as good.
This is a hot take, and we'll talk more about it when we
Yeah,
actually get to that division. But I don't think the Broncos are as good as people say they are.
I agree, but I don't hate the Broncos, but I think
No, I don't either. I just feel that they are the worst team in that
right,
division, but that does
I
by no
agree.
means mean that they are a bad team. That's
Yeah,
still a good
like
team.
if the Broncos were in the South, I think they win the division.
Oh,
But
for
I
sure.
think they might be fourth place in the West, which is kind of crazy.
It's insane to think about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see what happens in that division and the entire AFC. But these two teams are going to be at war with each other this season. They might even meet in the postseason. It'll be interesting to see how this plays out. So that's going to do it for this edition of the Fan Committee Football Podcast. Next episode, we're going to keep up with this division. Steelers and hopefully everyone's least favorite team now, the Cleveland Browns. They're so easy to root against. I mean,
Yeah.
I can't believe how quick it's flipped for them
Yeah.
from like the fairy tale they had to now, not even just because of Watson, but that's a big part of it. They're just kind of
Yeah.
insufferable right now.
It's insane. It's insane how you go from like we made the playoffs, we had a playoff win to
Yeah,
back at rock bottom again.
right, right.
Absurd.
So we'll talk about that and we'll talk about the Steelers because it sounds like me and you might have some slight disagreements about where this Steelers team can go this year. So
Yeah.
thank you guys for listening. Make sure to check us out on Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Other than that, have a great rest of your day. Thanks for listening.